I never thought a simple letter in my mailbox would destroy everything I'd built. It wasn't a bill or a notice. It was a threat. The HOA claimed they had full authority over my land, all 2,500 acres of it, and within weeks, they sold it off like it was theirs to give. My name, my legacy wiped off the map. But here's the part they never saw coming. I found a loophole buried deep in their own bylaws. And that loophole? It gave me power they couldn't take back. So tell me, who really owns revenge when the rules are broken? For most of my life, I believed peace was something you could build. One fence post, 1 acre at a time. My family's land stretched as far as the eye could see. 1,500 acres of open fields, old oaks, and the kind of quiet that city people pay millions just to rent for a weekend. It wasn't just property. It was legacy. My grandfather bought that land after returning from the war, and every generation since had added something. A barn here, a pond there, a story etched into the dirt. We weren't rich. We were steady. The kind of people who fixed our own fences, waved to neighbors, and minded our own business. The only sound that ever broke the stillness was the wind moving through the trees, or the laughter of my kids chasing each other down the gravel driveway at sunset. It wasn't luxury, but it was freedom. When the developers came, they didn't come with bulldozers. They came with smiles. They offered to beautify the area, turn our quiet community into something modern and organized. Before we knew it, there were manicured lawns, cookie-cutter mansions along the new lake, and a freshly minted HOA to maintain community standards. At first, I thought it wouldn't affect us. Our property was outside their neat little gates, beyond their jurisdiction, or so I thought. But when money's involved, boundaries have a way of moving. They started small, letters in the mail asking us to attend community meetings about zoning and shared access roads. I ignored them. We'd never shared roads. We'd never needed permission from anyone. But they kept coming. And soon, the language changed. Words like mandatory compliance and regulatory oversight started showing up. That's when I realized this wasn't a friendly HOA trying to keep lawns trimmed. It was a corporate machine disguised as a neighborhood. A group of wealthy newcomers who believed ownership was just a matter of paperwork and influence. I remember one morning stepping out onto the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the mist rise over the pastures when a convoy of SUVs rolled up to my gate. Out stepped 3 people in suits, the HOA board. They smiled, introduced themselves like politicians, and handed me a folder. Inside were documents claiming jurisdictional expansion and community integration. In short, they were trying to fold my 1,500 acres into their HOA without my consent. I laughed at first. It sounded absurd. My land was older than their entire subdivision, but they didn't laugh back. They just said, "You'll want to read the fine print." That's when the first crack appeared in my piece. Neighbors I'd known for years started to change. Some stopped waving. Others started whispering about how my land could add value to the community, how it wasn't fair that I didn't pay the same fees they did. It was subtle at first. A cold shoulder here, a complaint there, but it spread like smoke through dry grass. They called me the holdout, the one standing in the way of progress. And then came the signs. Not metaphorical ones, real physical signs. Private property, HOA access only. They planted them right at the edge of my fields. My name wasn't on them, but the message was clear. They were claiming it. I started digging into what was happening. The more I learned, the clearer it became. They were manipulating county lines, exploiting old zoning laws, and using a partnership with a local developer to redraw boundaries. On paper, it looked like I was part of their community district. In reality, they were staging a takeover. Still, I tried to stay calm. I hired a lawyer, sent letters, filed objections, but each time the HOA's response came faster and more aggressive. Late fees for shared services I never used, notices about non-compliance. Then, a certified letter stating that portions of my property had been reclassified for community use. That's when I realized what they were really after, not just control, but ownership. They wanted to carve up the land my family had built for generations and sell it piece by piece, and for a while, I felt powerless. Because on paper they'd already started. But there's something they didn't know. Something buried deep in their own stack of bylaws and legal jargon. A clause that was supposed to protect them, but could, in the right hands, destroy everything they'd built. And once I found it, I knew exactly how to make them pay. I spent nights buried in papers, zoning records, land deeds, HOA charters. I didn't have a legal degree, but I had patience, and fury makes for a great teacher. Every time the HOA tried to push me, I pushed back, with documentation, evidence, and precision. But the more I fought, the more aggressive they became. They sent inspectors onto my property, claiming they were checking easement access. They fined me for excessive vegetation near a road that wasn't even theirs. One morning, I found survey stakes driven into my field, bright orange flags marking lines that didn't belong. When I confronted the board president, a man named Eldon Price dripping with arrogance, he said, "You'll have to get used to it. This is a community now. Community." That word felt like poison. Then came the breaking point. I received a formal notice from the county clerk. Portions of my land had been transferred, not sold. Not leased, transferred. The HOA had filed a fraudulent deed using manipulated boundary maps. They'd sold parts of my land to developers, and construction had already begun. I remember standing there, staring at bulldozers chewing into my soil, feeling my heartbeat echo in my throat. My grandfather's barn, the one he built by hand, was gone by nightfall. But I didn't break. I documented everything, every forged paper, every email, every smirking word Eldon said to my face. And that's when I found it, the loophole. Buried in their bylaws was a clause granting special administrative authority to any owner with over 1,000 contiguous acres within the HOA's jurisdiction. It was meant to protect massive land investors, but thanks to their fraudulent boundary filing, that owner was me. They had accidentally made me the majority landholder, and by their own rules, that gave me legal authority to manage community property assets. And their assets, those pristine multi-million-dollar lakefront mansion, I moved quietly. My lawyer filed the paperwork, and by the time the HOA realized what was happening, it was already too late. I invoked the clause and called an emergency board meeting. Eldon and his group laughed when they arrived until I presented the documents, proving my legal control over the association's assets. Their smiles vanished. Under the law, I had the right to reallocate, liquidate, or dissolve community holdings to protect against financial misconduct, which, thanks to their fraudulent filings, I could easily prove. So I did exactly that. I legally sold off the HOA's most valuable assets, the lakeside mansions, the clubhouse, even the private marina, under the same laws they used against me. Every sale was perfectly legal, every signature backed by their own bylaws. Eldon tried to stop me, screaming about lawyers and injunctions, but by then, the buyers were lined up. The money went straight into a restitution fund, tied to the original land deed, mine. Their empire crumbled in weeks. The HOA went bankrupt. Eldon lost his home, his title, and every ounce of power he once lorded over me. By the time the dust settled, my land was whole again. The developers vanished. The signs came down. The quiet returned. Neighbors who'd once turned their backs now stopped to apologize, but I didn't need their words. I just wanted peace. Months later, I stood on the same porch with my coffee, watching the sun rise over the fields. The land my grandfather built, finally free again. I didn't win because I was stronger. I won because I learned their language, the language of power, of paperwork, of patience. The HOA had taught me something. The people who hide behind rules are never ready for someone who reads them. So when people ask what happened to that fancy lakeside community, I tell them this. They tried to take my home, so I took their world. Never underestimate the quiet man at the end of the road. He might just own the land you're standing on,